Hi everyone, welcome back to another week on my YouTube channel. My name is Brandy and I am the owner and artisan behind Brushed by Brandy. And this week we're working on this piece that's actually behind me, and it's kind of a bold color, you may have noticed. But this color actually has a little bit of a history for me, and that is a few years ago I was challenged to do a piece in a color that kind of intimidated me, and that color at the time came to my mind as yellow. I was a little afraid of yellow. And so I did a piece in a blend with Dixie Belle Kernel Mustard, and it ended up being one of my favorite pieces ever. And thankfully I held on to it. It's still in my house and I still look at that piece and I'm inspired by it. And it's a reminder to me that good things happen when you leave your comfort zone. And that's exactly what this color is. It's outside of my comfort zone, but I'm telling you, every time I do it, it ends up being so cute and so popular. So I'm super excited that I got this custom order inspired by some of my mustard yellow pieces, and I get to do it again. So we're doing this little cutie up here. We're going to do a blended finish. We're going to add some waxes. It's going to be really cute. So we're going to bring out a lot of these details. This piece has a lot of great natural details. We're going to bring those out. So I hope you guys will stick around, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Here's where I started on this piece. I love the size and I love all the detail. Ignore that hardware. It's a little crooked, but I do have all the pieces. This piece is super cute, but let's talk a little bit about the prep. This is going to be a custom order, and my customer was inspired by a few pieces I've done in Dixie Belle Kernel Mustard. Kernel Mustard is a little bright for me on its own, so I like to tint it with one of the Dixie Belle Browns. This is Pine Cone. Chocolate also works. Collard greens is also another option. But as far as my prep goes, this is a fairly modern piece. It's not super old and vintage, and it's actually made of a light wood. So even though it's got this dark stain on it, it's modern, it's a light wood. I'm not worried about this one bleeding. I don't feel like I need a primer on this. I'm going to go ahead and scuff sand this wood, and it's going to be ready to paint. As far as my top goes, I do need to sand it a little bit no matter what, because it does have some scratches in the finish, and I don't want those to show through on my painted finish. So no matter what, I need to sand those out. But my customer's a little unsure about maybe keeping the top in a wood stain. So I'm going to go ahead and sand through this. I'm going to leave this top wood for now, and then I'm going to see if she likes the wood tones or if we want to go ahead and paint over that wooden top. Now that I've assessed my piece and I know the steps I want to take on this prep, I go ahead and remove my hardware. For cleaning, I'm going to place it in a dish and soak these in a 50-50 mixture of white vinegar and water. I do have a cool finish plan for this hardware, but I always need to make sure that my hardware is clean before I do any finishes to it. The next thing I want to do is clean the body of my piece, and I'm going to use Dixie Belle White Lightning Cleaner. White Lightning is a granulated formula that I just dissolve into a bottle of warm spray water, and then I can reuse it over and over again. While I'm cleaning, I'm also getting acquainted with my piece, looking for any kind of repairs that need to be made or anything like that. I also want to make sure that I rinse my White Lightning Cleaner with water after I'm done. And no matter what kind of cleaner you use, you always want to make sure you rinse away your cleaning residue from your surface. It can affect the adherence of your paint. Okay, I had kind of assessed my piece in the beginning for the process that I needed to use on this particular piece. And I determined that I wanted to go ahead and scuff sand it. I'm not going to prime this, but I want to take down any gloss that's in my finish. For that, I'm going to use my Surf Prep sander, and I'm just going to use one of their sanding pads. And this is a medium grit. It just will Velcro onto my Surf Prep sander. And I'm choosing this because I don't want to go all the way through my finish, but I just want a light abrasive that's going to scuff up the finish on that. And then the pad will keep it from going all the way through the finish and also allow me to get around some of the curves and edges that are on this particular piece. So I'm going to turn on my vacuum and we're going to scuff this up. You'll notice I did go ahead and clean my piece before I'm scuffing because I don't want to grind any dirt and oils back into the wood. So I want to remove those, and then I'm going to scuff, and I will go ahead and clean again to remove any dust that I create. In my scuff sanding, I get really well acquainted with my piece, and for this particular one, I did find that there was a piece of loose trim up here. I'm going to go ahead and pull it off, and I found that I could pull this off, and it needs to be reattached. So I'm going to use a little bit of my Titebond Quick and Thick adhesive. It does have a little pin nail in here that it's stuck on with, and I'm going to stick that piece of trim right back onto my piece. And I will need to fill around this a little bit once my glue dries, because there's a little seam right here. So once this dries, I will come back and I'm going to fill this with just a little bit of Dixie mud so that you don't even notice that that repair was ever done. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and wipe away my dust with a little bit of water. And then I also wanted to point out anywhere that I had areas where there was scratches in my finish, I did go ahead and sand right through that. And so I've got these here. I'm probably going to spot treat these with a little bit of Boss, which is a stain and odor blocking primer, before I paint over them. And that's because I've exposed the raw wood in those couple of spots. All right, let's do some color mixing. So I know my basic color that I'm going to be using is going to be Dixie Belle Kernel Mustard, but I want to tint this. It's a little bright on its own, so I'd just like to tone it down a little bit. And so I've got some colors out here, and I'm going to show you my different color mixtures. I'm going to tint my Kernel Mustard with a little bit of collard greens. I've got chocolate, and I've got pine cone, and I think I'm going to pull out one more color. Okay, and I just grabbed some Gravel Road, and I chose Gravel Road because it's a gray, but it can lean kind of brown when you thin it out. So I'm just going to take my Kernel Mustard and I'm going to make some dots on my plate, and each one's going to represent a spot that I'm going to mix my color. And this way we'll be able to see them all side by side, how these different colors interact with the Kernel Mustard to give me different custom color mixes. And the only problem with this is I rarely know what my custom color mix ratios are. But that's okay. And then I'm going to use the same brush to dip into my colors, but I'm just going to wipe it off on a paper towel in between. So let me go ahead and take that Kernel Mustard off there. And the first color I'm going to dip into, let's go ahead and try the Gravel Road. And I'm going to go very light on it because it's going to overpower the Kernel Mustard pretty quickly because it's such a dark color. Yes, so that's going to happen really quick. And that tells me that when I mix it, I'm going to want to mix it slowly. But I can see how that tones down that Kernel Mustard, and I'm going to get it roughly to where I would want it to, just so it's a little muted, but it still is definitely a mustard color. All right, that's a pretty custom mix. That's definitely a contender. I like the Gravel Road. Let's go ahead and mix it with, move that one aside, and let's try the collard greens. And again, that's another example. It overpowers that Kernel Mustard really quickly, so I know that I'm just going to be tinting it. This is definitely not going to be a 50-50 mixture no matter which of these I choose. I like how the green interacts with the Kernel Mustard. That's a very pretty mixture too. All right, I'm going to clean off my brush again. Let's try the chocolate. I'm going to mix this one a little bit better. These are going to be very, very, very slightly different, but enough that I can choose from some different color options. This is the chocolate. Again, I went a little heavy. That tells me that when I'm mixing, it's going to be mostly Kernel Mustard and just a tiny, tiny bit of whatever one of these colors I choose. They overpower the Kernel Mustard very quickly because they're much darker. Okay, that's a pretty color. I always like that. Just a little tint really mutes that Kernel Mustard. So I've got Gravel Road, collard greens. This is chocolate here. Let's go ahead and do the pine cone. Again, I'm going to clean my brush off. Maybe I'll learn this time to come in with a little less pine cone. Pine cone's the most similar to Kernel Mustard. All right, and I like that mix too. So here's my original Kernel Mustard, and I just made some custom color mixes. I'm actually going to make a swatch of these all in my swatch book so that I can see them against the white. I'm having a little hard time telling next to each other which one I want to use. All right, so this is my swatch book of custom colors, and I'm going to pick up each of these off this plate, and I'm going to create a swatch for them in my swatch book. Okay, I've mixed these all in my swatch book. I will label them in just a minute, but this was the Kernel Mustard and the Gravel Road. This was Kernel Mustard and collard greens with chocolate and with pine cone. So I could mix these to different ratios and get this slightly lighter. I feel like I would want this slightly lighter, but I really like the mixture with the Gravel Road. So I just have a little bit of my Kernel Mustard left in this container. I'm going to go ahead and just tint this a little bit with some Gravel Road. In this tinting process, I'm going to go very, very slowly because I know that this Gravel Road will overtake my Kernel Mustard really quickly. So I'm just going to take A dab like that. And guys, that may be all I need. Just enough to tint. Yeah, I kind of like that. I just want to tone the kernel mustard down, but I don't want to really change the color. I'm going to go with a little bit more. So I will just mix this very slowly, but I feel like that's much closer to the color that I want, which is just a toned down version of kernel mustard. So don't be afraid to tint your colors. Mix them together, test them out, see what combinations you like. And I really, really, really love this color. I think it's spot on the mustard color that I really want. Let's talk about my basic color layout on this piece. I know that I want to do a basic highlight in the center of these drawers. Other than that, my body is going to primarily be my mustard color, my custom mixed mustard that I made. So I'm actually going to take these drawers out. I never find anything good in my dressers ever, but I found socks, and these are actually cotton socks, which are exactly what I like for staining. So I got myself a couple of staining socks. All right, guys, I was wrong that I never find anything of value in my dressers. I just found the most money I've ever found in a dresser. That's right. This is mine. I'm keeping it. It's $1. Let's go ahead and get a base coat on this body. I know that this base coat is not going to cover this dark wood in one coat. So it's going to take me a few coats. So I don't worry about getting this one super perfect. I just want to get my basic colors laid out. So I'm going to use my custom mixture that I created with the kernel mustard and the gravel road. And then I'm going to make a highlight using Dixie Belle drop cloth. Here is my piece after my first coat of paint, and you're going to notice that my coverage on this is not great at all. And the thing I want to point out to you guys is that every paint color has different pigmentation in it. So what I can tell you from this yellow, it's not going to get coverage over this dark wood. I don't even think in 2 coats. I think this finish is going to take me 3 coats. So I'm going to go ahead and basically repeat what I just did in my first coat for a second coat on here, and then but I'm going to plan on that I need a 3rd coat to get the coverage that I want. All right, we are on coat number 3 on this guy. Like I said, I just didn't get the coverage that I wanted out of my first 2 coats, but this one is doing it. I'm already 2 drawers down. This is my last drawer I need to do. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sand this with my Dixie Belle sanding sponge. Just a super light pass. And that just knocks down any unevenness that might be in there, little specks of dust or anything that settled in my paint. I've heard people call them crumbs. I like that. And then I'm going to tack it off with a damp rag. So my surface is dust-free and it's nice and smooth. Okay, so for this final coat, I'm going to do the same thing. We've done this a couple times now, but this is our final one. So this is the one that I'm really going to pay the most attention to. I'm going to start by outlining my drawer in my Colonel Mustard mix. This is my mix of Colonel Mustard and Gravel Road. And this just is giving me paint on my surface that I can work with, because I'm going to blend a little bit of a highlight into the center. This is a basic 2-color blend, even though my second color is a mix. So technically I'm at 3 colors that I'm using on this piece. All right, and the coverage on this coat is exactly what I wanted, so it just happens that this one needed 3 coats over that dark wood, which is not altogether uncommon. A primer would have probably saved me that coat. Okay, and I basically framed out a little highlight in the center, and that's where I'm going to come back with my Dixie Belle drop cloth, and I'm going to paint myself basically a stripe down the center. And I painted it down the center, but now I'm going to come back and I'm going to start working it in. And this is a I'm just using my Dixie Belle Mini, but there was barely any paint on here. So it's pretty dry now. I've pretty much laid off all the paint that I put on it, so I can come back and just start brushing that highlight into my surrounding color. And I just brush them together till I get this nice soft blend. And then I feel like I want to kind of pure it up in the center, just make it a little more white again. And so I just come back and add a little tiny bit more to this, right to the center, and brush that out again. All right, and once I feel like I've got my colors how I like them, I'm going to use my Dixie Belle Oval Medium, and I'm just going to kind of feather these two together. I'm going to work my way around the edges of this highlight, and I use my brush strokes in all different directions. When my brush starts getting a little muddy, I'm going to tack it off onto a dry rag. I'm using a very soft hand here, kind of just flicking the tips of my bristles at those colors. My paint has started to set up, so it's a little bit sticky here until I get this nice soft highlight in the center. I'm going to turn this for a second just so I can see where I am on my color. I want to make sure that I don't have any harsh edges around that highlight. Got a little brush here. And I still didn't get it. All right, so I like that where it is. And then I'm going to take, this is the Dixie Belle Premium Chip Brush. It's probably where my brush hairs are coming from. And I'm just going to, I'm using the Premium Chip Brush because it has this nice narrow profile on it. And I'm just going to dip it into a little bit of my Gravel Road, and I'm just going to use this to shade the edges of my drawer. So all I'm going to do is add a little stripe of my Gravel Road right there on the edge of that guy, and then I'm going to come do the same thing on this other side. All right, I'm going to give myself a tiny bit of water, and I'm just going to use my Oval Medium, and I'm going to work those two together. And it just gives this little bit of shading right on the outside of these drawers. This could also be done with waxes, and I am going to emphasize this with waxes, but I like the look, the saturation it gives when you have a little bit of dark paint underneath the waxes. All right, so I've got my subtle shade on the drawers. I've got my other 2 drawers here are done. I'm going to go ahead and shade the sides of this piece. We'll come back, and our next step is going to be, we're going to add some waxes on this one. So I'm doing one of my favorite steps to do, and it's actually detailing with some waxes. So I'm adding some waxes on this molding here, and then I've also added some along the frame of my drawers. And the 2 waxes that I'm using right now are Dixie Belle Best Staying Wax in black and in grunge gray. And these are really old containers, you guys, because I love when my waxes harden up. They make perfect waxes for detail work. So what I want to do right here is I want to go ahead and accentuate this little piece of molding, but I'm going to talk about a myth that you always have to clear coat your paint before you're putting any type of dark wax or dark glaze over top. You don't. The difference is the type of control that you want. So I am using wax because I love this soft ethereal effect that I'm getting around the edges of my molding, and this is unsealed paint. I'm going to use my grunge gray wax, and I'm just taking a chip brush that I've cut the tips off of, and I'm just going to load up my brush with some of this wax. Now I'm serious, you guys, I let my waxes sit out because I like when they harden up a little bit. Dixie Belle wax is a nice soft wax, and when I'm doing detail work, I really like a nice firm wax, so I think they get better with age. I have old waxes that I use for detail work, and then I have newer ones that I use for all over coverage. This is detail work. So I'm just going to take and I'm going to dig this wax into the crevices on my unsealed paint. And the reason that I can do this is because, number one, I've let this paint set for, it's probably set for about 3 days, so it's nice and dry, so I can be a little rough on it, and I'm not risking that I'm going to reactivate it or pull my paint or it's going to soften or anything because it's nice and set up. So I would not do this on fresh paint because I'm going to ask a lot of my paint right now. So I'm just going to dig it into all the crevices. And waxes and glaze can be interchangeable a lot of times. And this is one of those cases where you could choose a glaze for this job if you wanted to. I really like working in waxes, so I'm choosing the wax in this case. So I've put my wax on, and I'm going to come back with a dry rag. And it actually does wipe off. You can see how easily that wax wipes off over the top of it. Just exposes the yellow that's underneath. This is just a dry rag. But I actually like how it's leaving some of my paint a little dirty, a little grungy. So the difference between sealing your paint and not sealing is how much residual do you want to leave on your surface. If I had sealed this before, it would wipe back much cleaner and I wouldn't get some of this shadowing effect that I have down here. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm going to perfect this a little bit. I'm going to just soften up around the bottom here, make sure this fades out nice and evenly. Get it right where I want it. All right, I like that. That has a nice shadowy effect around the bottom of this guy here. And then I'm going to take a damp wipe. This could be a baby wipe. This is a cleaning wipe. Either one works fine. You could dampen your rag, and I'm just going to clean up the very tops of this. Remember, this is all unsealed paint. Dixie Belle Besting wax is a water-based wax, so because of that, it wipes back really, really easily. And because my paint is nice and set up, I can wipe over the top of it without doing any damage to my paint. And so what I've got here is the look of a glaze, but I just used a dark wax and I used it on unsealed paint. So I'm going to continue doing this detail work. I'm going to shadow around the rest of these moldings and things. And then when I'm done, I'll have this nice soft shaded effect all done using Besting wax on unsealed paint. I also can come back on my Besting wax and I can seal over the top of it because it's water-based. I can put a water-based top coat over this. I will spray this in clear coat so it won't affect the placement of any of these waxes that I've done deliberately. And that will be how I seal these in their place. I'm going to do one of my favorite things to do to hardware with these pieces of hardware, and that is I'm going to use patina paint. So what patina paint is it actually has particles of metal embedded in the paint, and you use a corrosive spray over the top of it, and it creates a natural patina effect on in your paint. And you can use this on hardware. So I have cleaned these, and I'm going to use Dixie Belle Patina paint in bronze. And bronze is this nice, rich, metallic bronze color. You can actually use this on its own without the corrosive spray as just a rich metallic. But I am going to corrode these, so I'm just going to take one of my Dixie Belle brushes, and I'm just going to use kind of a stippling motion. I intend to corrode these, so I want some nice texture in my patina. And I'm just going to lay a coat on. Now you don't apply the corrosive spray until your second coat of patina. Another thing I want to point out is I am doing this over metal. If you're doing this over metal, you usually want to use Prime Start, which creates a barrier between the metal and the patina paint so that the corrosion doesn't carry through to your metal underneath. This is just hardware. It's not a highly corrosive metal. I'm not super worried about this corroding. It would take a huge amount of time. It's just pot metal. And so I'm going to go ahead and apply these without Prime Start, but that is totally an option. If you're doing something and want to protect the metal underneath, you just want to be aware that that corrosion can carry through and corrode the metal underneath, and Prime Start is the answer to that. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up stippling these, and we'll come back and do the next step in just a minute. Okay, we are back for our next step. I went ahead and let these dry, and they're nice and dry, so I'm going to come back, and our second coat is going to be where we go ahead and really make our patina happen. So I'm going to repeat my first coat, and I'm going to stipple all of my hardware using the patina paint. While this paint is still wet, I want to come back and I want to spray it with my patina spray. So I'm going to run through these really quick, keep them nice and wet. We'll come back and do our spray together. Okay, and while my patina paint is nice and wet on my hardware, I'm going to apply my patina spray. Actually, I want to show you something really quick. Here on the lid of my container, you can kind of see what the patina creates. Has a little bit of the blue spots. That's the patina that we're going to create on our hardware. So I'm going to use the blue patina spray, and this is one of my favorites. I do love blue with bronze. It's a great combination, so I'm just going to take the lid off. You want to keep this lid because you want to make sure you store your patina with this lid on it, and rinse out your sprayer in between each use. These sprayers have metal in them, and it can corrode. If you leave this attached to your sprayer, it won't work the next time you come to use it. So I'm just going to attach my sprayer, and I'm going to go ahead and prime it into my spray nozzle, and this is ready to spray. And you can actually put these in your mister bottle. You can spray this as fine as you want, so I'm just going to kind of mist over the top. I don't want to stream, so I've tightened up my spray bottle pretty tight. And I'm just going to apply kind of a mist, so it creates kind of droplets. You can apply this with a sponge any way you want. All right, and now I'm just going to kind of come and make sure that's all in contact with my paint and even, so I don't have any puddling or anything. I don't want that either. I want it to kind of create a nice even patina on this hardware. All right, you guys, so that from here, I'm going to let these sit and dry, and we will come back tomorrow and check out what these look like, and they'll have some nice, awesome patina created with the bronze paint and the blue patina spray. I really love how this hardware came out. It has so much character and so much style, but I'm going to dress it up with a little bit of gilding wax. So all I'm doing is I'm going to start with these rosettes that hold my handles on. And I love the little bit of patina that they got, but I'm just going to take some gilding wax on the tip of my finger, and I'm just going to hit the very edges of this rosette, and I'm pulling it in from the edges. I'm just going to work my way around the circle. As I get closer to the center, it fades off my finger a little bit, and then I'm just going to kind of smudge it out. And I end up with this really pretty look on the rosettes with a little bit of gold on the edges that ties in with the gold, but it's got a very dramatic look. So, and then I'm going to do these guys here. I'm just going to hit these, the high points, with just a little bit of gold just for some shimmer on them. And that's going to be how I finish this hardware. I will spray these in a coat of clear lacquer just to protect the patina, but these are going to wear really, really well. And I think they have a ton of character versus the original. Going to be really cute. All right, let's talk a little bit about my staging for this piece. So I'm going to stage it pretty simply. Now, I chose a piece of art that has my same colors in it. It's got the yellow that I used on the body. It's got some of the blue for the patina that's in the hardware, and then I paired it with some blue glass. These blue glass pieces are from my own house, and I love them. She also hangs in my own house above a similarly colored piece. And so I offset my art just a little bit. She's not perfectly centered. So my flowers are off to one side, but I kind of like how that looks a little bit asymmetrical. I actually may place something a little bit taller right here just to give it a little bit of balance. I've got either some different art that I can use there, or a ladder or something would be cute. I don't know. I'll go in my house and look for something that I can put that's kind of tall next to it. But I love the colors of this. I like the composition of it. I've got different height levels. I've got some interest down low. My piece is my medium, and then I've got a high point over here. And I just think if I added something a little bit taller here, it would add some balance. So that's a little bit of the reasoning behind my staging, tying my colors all together. It's got some nice balance, some symmetry. So I like this. I'm going to go with it. This piece is done. I love this color, you guys. It's so bright and cheery. Talk about a statement piece for any room. And I'm sorry, but I love the girl with the pearl earring. It looks like she's looking at you from every direction. Look at these photos. This was a fun piece. If you guys enjoyed this video, click that subscribe button. You can find a link for everything I use in this video in the description for this post. And more Brush by Brandy on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, and on my website at brushbybrandy.com.